I'm Ellen Snoeyenbos, the Library Director here in West Bridgewater. And with the holidays approaching, I'd like to give parents some ideas about how to integrate reading more deeply into your family life. How this all came about was Mr. McLaughlin at the Howard School asked Nanette Ryan and I, the Children's Services Librarian, to give a book talk to all the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders this fall here at the library, emphasizing and highlighting books that we thought they would really enjoy knowing about and that we thought they could bring home to have their families enjoy as well. It was a huge success. We had so much enthusiasm and involvement on the part of children and their parents that I thought it might be really great if we could highlight a few of those titles that would be especially great for a family read aloud, and also give you some ideas and tips on how to help make reading a more integral part of your family life. As we all know, our attention is very much distracted these days by video games and TV and movies and all sorts of digital devices. And there's nothing wrong with those. I thoroughly enjoy them myself. But at the same time, I know how crucial it is for the intellectual development of your children to make sure that reading is a really fun and well-used activity in order for them to get good at reading and so that their reading comprehension can increase, and that you can all see reading as a really fun way to enjoy each other's company and have quality family time. So first I'm going to give you a few tips that I've learned along the way, and then we'll talk about a few of the books from the actual lists that we book talked at the Howard School that I think will be particularly great family read-alouds. Okay, first tip number 1 is it's great to make books part of your family life. Have books around at home. Come to the library frequently and borrow books. We always tell the kids, borrow more than one book, because what if you don't like it? Then you'll have something to fall back on. And you as adults too, take some books off of our bestseller table or our new fiction table, or pull a book off the shelf that you've read a long time ago that you might enjoy reading again. A lot of great parenting is imitation, and if children see their parents reading for pleasure, they will see that as a great idea as well. Come to the library. We have a lot of resources here. We have great collections for all age groups. We have activities for the children, activities for adults. We have reading groups. And it's great if you really get comfortable with our collection, so you know just where to find the things you're really looking for. And always, don't forget, you can always ask a librarian for help if you're looking for a particular kind of book or a particular age-appropriate book. Something that is also really important to remember is that books now come in many, many different formats. There are graphic novels. There are novels in poetry format. There are nonfiction books that kids really like to read. And of course, there are novels, which are a long form of imagination. All of these are great choices if your child has a real interest in animals. We have an incredible collection here of all sorts of different animals and types of wildlife that they could find interesting. So don't limit yourself to one kind of book. Maybe take a bunch of books out to really make sure that there's a variety of reading material in your home. Something I'd like to really encourage people to do is borrow a book of poetry. Now, I was never a big fan of poetry growing up, but that's because my parents didn't really introduce it to me in a fun and inventive way. Many of you know the books by Shel Silverstein, who was a funny poet in his day. But you may not know that Jack Prelutsky is another wonderful poet who writes funny books about daily life of children. This one is called The New Kid on the Block. And all of his poems are kind of story-like. And they're short, and they're very engaging, and they're witty and funny. And so either the listener or the reader will really enjoy reading those. Another poetry resource that you might find interesting is Carolyn Kennedy, who wrote poems to learn by heart. These are a little bit more mature poems, but there's things like Casey at the Bat and the Gettysburg Address, various poems by Robert Louis Stevenson, and those are fun to read and read again and take into your memory if you have that interest. All reading is good, and all reading is valuable to both the child and the parent. Something else we really encourage is to find a time of day to really set aside for reading. Maybe it's like right after supper, right after their bath. It's a really quiet time. You can really settle in on the couch and find a book that you're either continuing to read, or like I say, with poetry or a nonfiction book, you might read, a few poems or a book on caterpillars, and that will be a fun thing to share. I think a big mistake parents frequently make is they think, okay, my kid knows how to read, I can let them go and they can read on their own. As well as we are grateful for the time when kids can read on their own, it's never a good idea to stop reading out loud. My kids, who are all both in their 30s by now, I read out loud to them all the way through high school, and we shared the reading. When they wanted to read Little Women, we read it together. Sometimes one of us read a chapter, the other would read another chapter. And it was a fun way to share some of the great literature out there and give voice to some of the seminal characters in American and British literature. So reading out loud is something that everybody can enjoy. Another way to, in a sense, read out loud is to download a book to your device, and you can listen to a book. Listening to an audiobook on a trip, on a car trip, can be just a wonderful experience. And we have two apps for that. We have the Libby app and the Hoopla app that can be downloaded from the library website and found on your in your app store. And with your West Bridgewater Library card, you can go in and borrow all sorts of materials for free. And if you have a car ride to go on, or a plane ride, or even just sitting around home and want to listen to someone else read a story to all of you, that's a really fun option. So on your phone, you have many ways to access the library, one of which is using the Sales mobile app, which you can find right here. You can download that. It's called Sales Mobile, and you find your library, and you enter your library card number. And here I have my all of my checkouts. I've got 16 checkouts. These are all the books I've checked out, including my audiobooks. And I can look at the holds that I have. I've got a gazillion holds that I'm waiting for. And when they come in, they'll let you know. You'll get an email, and you're able to download the book, or you can go in to the library to pick up the hard copy if that's what you ordered. So this is just a wonderful resource, and once you put your library card number in, it shows up all the time. You don't need to worry about losing your card, because it's always on your phone. And you can also couple your card number with your children's card numbers, so that you can have all of your family's cards together, and you can keep track of what's overdue and what's coming up to be due and that sort of thing. So that's a wonderful resource. Now, if you're going on a trip, I highly recommend downloading both Libby, which is the new Overdrive app, and also Hoopla, but this is Libby. These are the books I'm listening to in the car. I'm listening to the David McCullough book, The Pioneers, and you just open it up, you download it, and you listen. It's just a wonderful story. But of course, if you had your kids along, you'd want to borrow a book that was more kid-friendly. And the Hoopla is another wonderful resource. Here I have a list of the books that I've been listening to, one of which is a book that I'll be talking about in my family-friendly book series. It's called The Underneath by Kathy Upheld. And you can simply borrow that, and this book will be available for you for 21 days on your device. You can download it, or you can just stream it. Either way is fine to do. So this is a way you can have the library you can have a wonderful access to the library resources without even having to go into the building. So here, this is the audio book. If you were in your car driving along and you wanted to listen to the underneath, this would be a great way to listen. Those are all available with your library, West Bridgewater library card and your mobile device. So you would look, if you were looking for the apps, you don't happen to have them, you'd go into your app store and you would look for Libby, which is the Overdrive, Libby by Overdrive, and that's that. And of course I've already got it, but you would download it here where it says Libby by Overdrive, or, because I think it's great to have both. You can do Hoopla Digital, and Hoopla Digital is right there. And you want to download that, and you'll have access to books, audiobooks, movies, graphic novels, all sorts of wonderful resources. And they will, when your time is up with them, they just fall off your device, and you will never have to be charged a fine. So I highly recommend all parents go in and download those two resources, because audiobooks are a wonderful way of sharing literature with your family. And what I found, interestingly enough, was if I started my kids out reading out loud, sometimes they got impatient and would just take the book and say, like, I have to find out what happens, I have to find out what happens. And then they would take the book and read it themselves as they went further into the story. So it's a great teaser, I almost like to think, reading out loud. And then something else to think about is ask them questions about the story. Why do you think he did this? What do you think will happen to her if she does that? Get them thinking, get their imaginations going with the storyline, and you can find out if you were right or not. And also, projecting different situations is a really sophisticated attribute to encourage with your children. People always say, read the book before you see the movie. And sometimes that's really great advice. Sometimes it's really nice to read the book first so you have an idea in your own mind of what the characters would be like. But you know what? I've decided that that's not always the case. Sometimes seeing the movie and then reading the book is a great idea. Because especially with books like Harry Potter, a lot of kids have already seen some of those movies. And it's a huge enticement into reading the book, because as the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders told us this last couple of weeks, when I said, what do you think the book has that the movie doesn't have? And the kids would raise their hand and they would say, more detail. And I can imagine what Harry and his friends looked like in a way that might be different from the way the movie people imagine them. And so you're really encouraging them to kind of compare and contrast, which is also a wonderful skill to develop. Here's something else that can sometimes drive you crazy, but bear with me. If they love a book and they want to read it again, just do it. Read it again and again. Kids love to read books over and over again. And not just little ones, but older children too love to read books over and over again. And it can be just a fun way to enjoy them together and create family memories that you will cherish for years to come. Sometimes when I was a preschool teacher, I would do this. I would read a well-known picture book, and I would change a word every once in a while. And the kids would go, oh, no, that's not the right word. And they would they would remember the word and fill it in for me. And I would go, oh, you're right, my mistake. And I would go on and go on. And the funny thing was that for fidgety kids, that's a great way to keep them engaged, because they're going to be wanting to see like what word you messed up next. So it's a fun kind of silly game to play with, especially with picture books. So those are sort of my tips on how to keep books, keep your kids involved with books and encourage them. It's important to have books around. Magazines are a great resource as well. Always have books around your house and dip into them yourself. They are watching you and seeing if reading is something that you enjoy as well. And I always say to parents, you know, if you're a young parent, your life is so hectic and so busy. Sometimes you don't have time to really settle down into a book, but it can be a real, really relaxing to read and a real escape from the day-to-day hectic lives that you lead, to sit down and just really kind of make sure you give yourself that private time to read. And as much as it is a pleasure to you, your children are watching you as well. So those are some suggestions, and stick with it, even if your children seem a little reluctant at first to add these routines into your family life. You know, just be gently nudging them towards it and finding the time to spend reading together as a family. Okay, now I'm going to turn to a few of, I would say 6 of the books that we book talked to the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders these past few weeks that have a particular interest to the kids, and we think would be a really interesting, these would be very interesting books for parents to read out loud and talk about with their kids. The first book that we chose is called Click by Kayla Miller. Now, Click is what we call a graphic novel. That means that every page is full of illustration. The words are there, but the words are mostly captions to the pictures. And Click tells the story of Olive, who has friends in school. She's in 5th grade, and the school decides to have a variety show. And everyone is very excited, and they talk to their friends, and they decide what they're going to do for their variety show. But Olive discovers that everyone has decided without her what they're going to be doing for the variety show, and her feelings are really hurt because no one has chosen her for their idea or their project, and she is beginning to feel like, don't I have friends? And so this is a story about how Olive, with the help of her aunt, discover that there are ways to entice her friends into doing things with her, and that she can be her own person as well. So that's a great choice. The kids have been really interested in reading that, and just think of the conversations that you can have over that book. The next really fun read is called The Next Great Polly Fink by Allie Benjamin. Now, Allie Benjamin is a pretty new author. Her first book was about science, and this book, The Next Great Polly Fink, is more about philosophy. And the setting of this story is the girl, Caitlin, her family moves to a very rural place. She used to live in the city, and now she lives in the country. And she's going to school now in a very small school where everybody has been together since they were like in kindergarten. And they start telling her about Polly Fink. Polly Fink, oh, you wouldn't believe what a great guy he was, Polly Fink. And she's wondering, who is this Polly Fink? It turns out Polly Fink was someone who left the school, and he was kind of famous amongst their classmates. And they're wondering, who will be the next great Polly Fink? And she's wondering, am I supposed to be that next great Polly Fink or someone else? So this is a story about fitting in, finding your place in the world, and also being yourself. The third book I highly recommend as a family read is called The Boy at the Back of the Class by Unjali Rofe. This is a book about a Syrian refugee who moves to England. And he's lost his family, he's on his own, he's being taken care of by an agency, and he is wondering, he doesn't speak English well, his classmates think he's very strange and wonder about his past. There's some bullies in the class who make fun of him. Other kids are very nice to him, but wonder what's happening with him. But what's great about Ahmed is that he is a strong character, and he sees through to the real nature of his new friends, and they discover that he has a wonderful role to play in their class, as a big asset to their classroom. The fourth book in our list of fabulous read out louds is a really funny one. It's by Carl Hiaasen, and it's called Chump. Carl Hiaasen, many of you might know, is a Miami-based writer. He wrote for the Miami Herald for years, and he also is well known for adult murder mysteries. Well, he did that for a while, and now he's really into what he calls eco-adventure stories. Chump is just hysterical. It's based in Florida, like all his books are, and the boy in the story, his name is Wahoo Cray, lives on an animal sanctuary. His father is what's called an animal wrangler, and he wrangles, or in other words, he takes care of wild animals that are used on movie sets or reality TV shows. He knows how to handle the animals. He knows how to manage the animals. And this story is just hysterically funny. It takes place when his father and he are hired by this reality TV show and this utter nincompoop of a prima donna star to wrangle animals for them. And of course, the animals are very wild and sometimes scary. And there are bats and alligators and birds and all sorts of insects and all sorts of things. They go way out in the middle of the Everglades, and they have to figure out how to do the show and how to make sure no one dies. And of course, there has to be a storm. A storm comes in, and all sorts of crazy things happen. And his father, who can't stand the lead guy in the reality show, comes, close to doing some real damage. And anyway, it's a funny story, and it's a great read aloud for all ages. And then the next story that would be a great read aloud is called Peter Nimble and His Fantastic Eyes. Now, this is a real fantasy. If you are a Harry Potter fan or love books with lots of magic in them, this is going to be a real good one for you. Peter Nimble is a 10-year-old blind orphan. It's set in London, and he has been raised by this kind of terrible man who uses him to steal from people. He becomes the best thief in London, and even though he's blind, he has great hearing, he has a great sense of touch, and he has a way of just vanishing in people's presence because he's so still. Well, one day, he decides to steal this box from a merchant, and he opens the box, and inside the box are 4 pairs of eyes. And he puts one set of eyes into his empty eye sockets, and all of a sudden he's taken away, he's carried away on this magical adventure. And it's a quest, it's not just an adventure. He has been chosen because of who he is to go far away with his crazy sidekick on an adventure across the seas and across the desert to a kingdom that desperately needs a hero. So that's Peter Nimble and His Fantastic Eyes, and it's a really fun story, and that one has some sequels. And last but not least is just a beautiful book I highly recommend called The Underneath by Kathy Upheld. She is actually a poet. But this is a book for children, and it's won the it's a Newbery Honor Book winner, and it's set in the bayous of Louisiana, and it's about this old hound dog who is kept on a chain under this cabin by this really nasty old man named Garface. And he's treated poorly, and he's just barely eking out a living. Anyway, one day, this calico cat, a pregnant calico cat, comes sauntering up. And the hound dog is lonely, and he says, have your kittens under my porch. And so she goes underneath the porch and has her kittens, and they become fast friends. And then, of course, one of the kittens, as they gets older, you know how kittens are, wanders away and gets into trouble. And of course, there's Garface, who's a danger to all who go in his path. And the hound and the calico cat must find a way to save the kitten and also find a way to save themselves, because who knows what Garface has planned for them. It's a beautiful book, lots of illustrations, and would make just a lovely, lovely read aloud to a wide range of ages. Those are a few of the books that we book talked this past month to the Howard School, and we encourage you to come to the library and find anything else you might be interested in. You can come and on top of Nanette's desk are all the lists, and the lists can also be found on our website. And on the website we have it so that you can click on each title. You can click on them and it goes directly into the catalog, so you can place a hold on that book and have it waiting for you at the library. So without further ado, I wish all of you a wonderful holiday season. Oh, and I did want to mention, on Wednesday, December 4th, we're going to be having a holiday gift book talk sponsored by the library and Paperback Junction, which is a wonderful little independent bookstore in Northeaston. And she's going to bring over copies of the books, and we're going to book talk them. And then if you want to purchase the books, we'll have them available for purchase, or you can borrow them from the library. So that's on Wednesday, December 4th. And that's going to be a lot of fun. We did that last year and it was very, very popular. But without further ado, I wish all of you a wonderful holiday season. Come into the library and see what we have to offer. And I hope in the new year that you make reading an integral part of your family life. Thank you.